Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Pakistan says it wants an inclusive government in Afghanistan which respects human rights. In an interview, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad wants to be a partner in peace and could be the most trusted mediator. Meanwhile, the US and Germany have told their citizens to avoid traveling to Kabul airport, citing security risks. In Afghanistan, witnesses say the Taliban have imposed some order around the chaotic Kabul airport. In Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan's Boya area. In a statement, the military's media wing said weapons and ammunition were recovered from the killed terrorist. Meanwhile, an army captain was martyred after a security forces vehicle struck an IED planted by terrorists in Balochistan. Israel has violated ceasefire yet again, bombing Gaza after wounding 41 Palestinians with gunfire on the border. Israeli military said its warplanes struck Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. The raids came hours after Israeli soldiers opened fire on hundreds of Palestinians protesting near the Strip's border. Well, these were the top stories. Using detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Pakistan says it wants an inclusive government in Afghanistan that respects human rights. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Islamabad wants to be a partner in peace and could be the most trusted mediator. In an interview, he said Pakistan has been calling for a continuous negotiation process along with the date of withdrawal. The foreign minister said Pakistan is currently engaged in evacuating people from Kabul, but it is not being acknowledged. Qureshi said the world did not listen when Islamabad said the Kabul government was corrupt and did not enjoy political support. He deplored that Pakistan was not responsible for 9/11, yet it suffered 80,000 casualties and $150 billion worth of economic loss. Now, Australia says it has evacuated over 300 citizens and foreign nationals from Kabul overnight. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said these people include Australians, Afghan visa holders, New Zealanders, US and British citizens. Defending his country's withdrawal from Afghanistan, Morrison said Canberra was left with no choice once the US made its decision to leave. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom's Defence Ministry said it has evacuated over 3,800 individuals since 13th of August. The US and Germany have told their citizens in Afghanistan to avoid traveling to Kabul airport, citing security risks. But witnesses say the Taliban have imposed some order around the chaotic Kabul airport. A Taliban spokesperson said the group was aiming to provide a smooth exit for those who want to leave over the weekend. Now, former US President Donald Trump has attacked President Joe Biden's handling of American forces' withdrawal from Afghanistan. At a rally in Alabama, Trump called it the greatest foreign policy humiliation in the United States history. He said Biden's botched exit is the most astonishing display of gross incompetence by a nation's leader. The Republican added this is not a withdrawal but total surrender. In another development, the UK said it will have to turn to Russia and China to exercise a moderating influence over the Taliban. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair condemned what he called the West's abandonment of Kabul as dangerous and unnecessary. In an article, Blair noted the US pullout decision was driven by politics and not by grand strategy. Meanwhile, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is convening an extraordinary session on the Afghanistan situation today. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan Boya area. In a statement, the military said it also recovered weapons and ammunition from the slain terrorist. The ISPR said a search operation is underway to eliminate any other terrorists in the area. Meanwhile, an army captain was martyred after a security forces vehicle struck an IED planted by terrorists in Balochistan. The ISPR said 2 other soldiers got injured in the incident that occurred in Gichik's Tobo area. Now, Israel has violated ceasefire yet again, bombing Gaza after wounding dozens of Palestinians with gunfire on the border. Israeli military said its warplane struck Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. The recent bombings came after indiscriminate Israeli firing at a Palestinian demonstration wounded 41 Palestinians, including 2 critically. Gaza's health ministry says the critically wounded include a 13-year-old boy who was shot in the head. An Israeli soldier was also injured in the clashes at the Gaza Strip's heavily fortified border. The protest was being carried out to draw attention against the forceful Israeli blockade of the territory. Now, Russia says it will respond robustly to the US sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. In a statement, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said it is useless to put pressure on Moscow. Zakharova said Moscow views the sanctions as Washington's lack of political will to build bilateral relations based on a partnership. Meanwhile, Russian ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov, termed the curbs an attempt to gain a competitive advantage for its fuel and tech supplies. He said Moscow believes that the format for using the pipeline should be determined primarily in Germany and not in the United States. Mexico has reported nearly 850 daily deaths from COVID-19 and over 20,000 new infections. Globally, the coronavirus death toll is over 4.42 million, while the caseload has surpassed 211 million. More details about the pandemic in this report. COVID numbers continue to grow despite millions of vaccines administered across the world. In the United States, the vaccine-producing company Moderna has mandated its employees and contractors to get inoculated, while CDC has instructed people at an increased risk of severe illness to avoid travel irrespective of their vaccination status. Other than shots, lockdowns are a key element to control the virus spread, but they are taxing the patience of many. In Peru, hundreds of families marched in Lima to demand the reopening of schools. President Pedro Castillo has said schools will reopen once all the citizens have an opportunity to get vaccinated.
I think the virtual education that they're receiving is not enough. Computers are not replacement to the socialization that they need for their mental health. To build friendships, children need to run, jump, talk and play.
New Zealand's COVID cases have risen by 21 to 72, with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern warning the number will go higher in the next few days. In Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison defended the lockdown strategy, saying it would stay until at least 70% of the population is fully vaccinated. 914 cases of the highly infectious Delta variant surpassed the previous high of 894 a day earlier. The state of New South Wales reported a record 830 new locally acquired infections.
The cases at the moment are not jumping up in the sense of exponentially. They are up. They're up quite substantially in the last few days. But just in the last 2 days, of course, it's been in the 800s. I'm hoping that we will not see that major escalation.
Vietnam says it is sending troops to Ho Chi Minh City to help deliver food and aid to households. The government has further tightened restrictions on people's movements amid a worsening surge of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 65 more deaths from coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide toll of fatalities is nearing 25,000. The ministry said the virus infected another 3,842 people overnight. Meanwhile, the positivity rate of daily infections has climbed to 7.1%. The ministry said the country's caseload has surpassed 1,123,000, of which more than 1 million have recovered. It said over 89,000 cases are active, while more than 5,300 are in critical condition. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has arrived in Singapore to kick off her Southeast Asian trip in a bid to establish deeper. Harris was received at the airport by Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. She is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong on Monday and hold a joint news conference with him. The U.S. Vice President will also participate in a roundtable focused on supply chain issues. She will arrive in Vietnam on Tuesday and will become the first U.S. Vice President to visit the country. Now, 10 people have died while dozens others are missing after flash floods hit the eastern American state of Tennessee. Details in this report. In Tennessee, 430 millimeters of record-shattering rainfall in less than a day washed away homes and rural roads. Authorities say the rescue and search services are being hindered amid power outages all over the area. Meanwhile, Hurricane Henry is tracking towards the country's northeast and is likely to make landfall today in the areas of southern New England. Parts of the region have started feeling first impacts like heavy rain as the storm barrels closer to the region. Over in Mexico, severe flooding and landslides has killed 8 people after Hurricane Grace battered the country's eastern coast. The Category 3 hurricane whipped up maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour as it slammed into the coast. Authorities say the storm has resulted in torrential rains, severe flooding and mudslides. Now in Greenland, rainfall has occurred at the highest point on the ice sheet for the first time in recorded history. Scientists have warned that this is another worrying sign of rapid global warming. Details in this report. Last week, rain fell for several hours at the over 3,000-meter summit of Greenland's ice sheet. Scientists say it is an unprecedented occurrence for a location that rarely sees temperatures above freezing. In less than a decade, the temperature at the ice cap has gone unusually high, which is very worrisome for experts.
Well, I mean, it hasn't rained there in the past because, generally speaking, it never gets above freezing. At that latitude, that close to the pole, at that altitude, it's cold, even in the summertime.
The rain and high temperatures triggered extensive melting across the island, which suffered a surface ice mass loss.
You raise temperatures a couple degrees in the mid-latitudes, it's something you don't maybe notice even, but raising it from 1 degree below freezing to 1 degree above freezing is a difference. If you're in the Arctic Ocean, it's a difference between ice skating and swimming. And so that's where we see these small changes can have bigger effects. And they're an indicator of the bigger effects that we're starting to see now more and more in the mid-latitudes, things like more fires, more heat waves, more extreme weather.
Rising global temperatures driven by climate change have made extreme weather events more common. Greenland experienced a massive melting event in late July. Enough ice melted in a single day to cover the U.S. state of Florida in 2 inches of water. Now, Switzerland has started the construction of its largest alpine solar plant to help secure renewable energy throughout the year. The 2.2 megawatt project is part of Swiss plans to plug the gap left by the phase out of nuclear energy. Strategies to limit the impacts of climate change have become divisive in Switzerland. Under the government's Energy Strategy 2050, Switzerland plans to increase energy production from renewables and hydro generation, aiming to add 2 terawatts by 2040. The project manager says the transition is going on to a certain extent, but will eventually gain momentum.
This is the idea to have installations in other places as well, like here on a dam, on a hydropower dam, but it could be made on infrastructure in general.
The Alpine location will let the Mutsee plant deliver half its production during the winters, when sunlight is generally in short supply in Switzerland. Solar plants at lower elevations produce only around a quarter of their electricity during this half of the year. Switzerland imports electricity, especially from European Union, in the colder months. But snags in relations with the European Union mean Switzerland must urgently up its winter energy production.
Need is bigger in winter than in summer, and it will be even more so in the future. So therefore we're looking for a high ALPINE installation for a balanced yield, that is not only in summer but also in winter.
Nuclear power last year generated a third of the country's electricity, while fossil fuels still accounted for more than 60% of Switzerland's overall energy consumption. When it is completed, foreseeably by year-end, the Mutsi will have nearly 5,000 solar modules, producing around 3.3 million kilowatt-hours of electricity per year. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.